Hey guys, Dr. Snellgrove here, just recording a quick video for, I guess you might call it part one, chapter 12 in our tech writing class. Also, rocking a little bit of a haircut. It was windy enough recently that my long hair was actually getting in my face. So we got to do something about it. So the reason I wanted to split these recordings up, you might say, our final assignment, of course, is focusing on creating a resume. And that's in the second half of this video. So I'd kind of like, oh, well, the second half of this chapter. So I'd like it to have its own separate video to make it easier for you to focus on that part when you are actually writing your resume, finalizing that assignment. But with that being said, the first part obviously is still very important because it's kind of walking you through like, okay, how, other aspects of the job search process you need to be concerned with, including the actual like application. Because a lot of people, I don't know exactly how this happens, but a lot of people put the cart before the horse in the sense of thing, I got to have a killer resume. And it's like, well, yeah, of course, a killer resume is important. That's why it's a killer resume. But it is surprisingly easy to screw up certain things and not even realize you're doing it during the application process. In worst case scenario, nobody even sees that killer resume anyway. All right. So they have a thing here, bottom of 334 going to the top of 335, talking about like obviously abide by the instructions given, like, how are you supposed to submit this application? Usually electronically, of course, these days, but sometimes the book points out there might be a thing like, hey, make sure these attachments are in PDF format or something like that. And, you might be one of the best candidates in the world, maybe the best candidate in the world, but they're very likely to just junk your application if it's like, oh, here's my doc file instead of my PDF file. It's like, well, you got started not paying attention to their instructions. It's a kind of bad way to start a relationship when you get right down to it. And then the book, I don't think gets into this, and maybe this is just in some of my insane fields, I suppose, because I do a lot of freelance writing. I've seen an increasing amount of things where it'll have like the job posting, the description, and all this, and then at the very end, it's like, make sure that your application says banana somewhere in the subject line. And they're doing that as like baby's first screening process, where it's like, oh, hey, here's the email that all the applications are coming into. Now search banana. And it's like, what have you got here? You've got the list of applicants that actually followed all the instructions. They actually read the whole thing and listened to you. And of course, that's what they want. Okay. So they talk about different like online applications, sometimes different fields. You might have like, hey, what are your credentials? Like it could be educational credentials in some cases, business credentials, special certificates. What are your objectives? And I don't know if we get into it in this chapter, but I got to tell y'all, whenever I'm applying for jobs, at least back in the day, I'm kind of at my forever main job now. But that was always sort of weird. It's like, what is your objective? Like, I'm not supposed to just tell you to make money, but that is my objective. So usually if they really do pester you for something like that, I haven't seen that in a hot minute for at least stuff I apply for. But you can usually do some gentle fibbing there. What is your objective? To maximize my potential while helping your organization, reach the next level or something like that. That's all part of presenting yourself as an asset to their business. We're definitely going to talk more about that later. Okay. And then let's see. Oh, it does mention like this is the rare. This does not happen very often, but there are cases where you could go to like a job fair, for instance, and apply for a job without having to, submit a formal application or whatever. So usually in those cases, and only in those cases, it's like you have a quick sit down mini interview, give them your resume, hope for the best. But 99 times out of 100, if not 999 times out of 1,000, you're finding job openings online. You are applying to them online. Speaking of online, I was so pleasantly surprised to see middle of 335 going into towards the bottom of 336. The book has an actual helpful section on like, hey, AI screening. And it was kind of making me smile when I was reading this section. Because as I'm recording this, people are just going gaga for like all these weird AI applications. Man, Chat GPT, look what it can do. Oh, look at this AI art. The kind of AI they're talking about here is like, I mean, I guess maybe it's more advanced than it used to be, but employers have been doing this for a very long time. Basically, they can set certain algorithms up, a little program. It's like, hey, we're going to get hundreds maybe of applications for this job. I want you to screen for certain things. So they have some stuff at the bottom of 335, going to the top, I guess, of 336, like, hey, make sure that your resume or your application, really anything that you submit electronically is kind of like AI screening friendly. It's like, all right, do I have a single column of text? It doesn't like double columns of text. Honestly, I'm a human and not an AI, at least I think. I don't like double columns of text either. Standard fonts, like I know as college students, y'all are probably so sick of stuff like Times New Roman, but things like, your book points out Times New Roman, Arial, these are standard fonts in the most literal sense, as in a great many professional businesses and organizations use them. So by you using them, it's like, hey, I fit in. I don't want to stand out in a negative way. Don't use italics. I mean, honestly, I would say that even without the AI screening concern, don't italicize your applications or your resumes. Bulleted list instead of tables. We've been talking a lot about bulleted list in this class for things like presentations and how it's visually pleasing for a human when they want to quickly skim information. It's like, give me the top 3 points in bullet point form or something like that. But also that's, from a screening standpoint, it's easier for a computer to read the points that you have in bullets rather than in a table, which if you think about it is really just the same reason that you don't want to have double columns of text. You're making it harder for the damn machine to read it. You want to make it easier for the damn machine to read it. And no pictorial elements, no pictures. Again, I personally would say that extends to just any resume. And if you are turning something in at the job fair, please don't have pictures in it. I mean, outside of some very specific fields, you're an artist, but even then you have a portfolio. Don't just submit random stuff in part of the resume itself. Anyways, this was the most important part, I think, as somebody that does, freelance, continue to apply for these things. But you want to find the keywords that they were using in the job description, and you want to include those keywords in your application and your resume, because that's like the main thing they're screening for, where it's like, all right, we want applicants that have XYZ experience. And so it's like, okay, how does the AI know what to look for? Well, they tell it, make sure the applications are using these keywords. And you don't have to be a mind reader to turn around and use those keywords. All you really have to do is look again at the job description and what were they saying? It's like, all right, I'm going to make sure to pepper that throughout the application and throughout my cover letter. So it helps you survive the AI screening process, hopefully. But also, I've been telling this to students for years. Even by the time a human being is reviewing your job application, using their own phrasing, using their own keywords like this, it's another display of confidence. Because I like your textbook emphasizes this entire process is about confidence, and so it shows that you are basically already speaking the language. Like, you don't want to be arrogant, something else the textbook touches on, but a good job application rule of thumb is to go in kind of like you already have the job rather than someone desperate to get the job. You have that confidence, you're able to underscore what you bring to the table, what you are able to contribute to the organization. And I don't know, it sounds psychological because it is psychological, but it really is nice to get your headspace out of like, dear God, please, please, please give me a job, to like, once I'm hired, I'm going to do this, this, this. I'm going to do this for this department. I've got some ideas. It's like, oh, yeah, they would be an asset if we hired them. Let's do that sooner rather than later. All right. And then the another thing, I'm sure none of you would be pretentious enough to do this, but it says to avoid making things sound overly fancy, use standard terms and familiar words. So this one, I felt like they were practically calling me out. It's like, hey, if the job notice says you have to have a degree in technical communication, You might kind of puff out your chest and it's like, I have a degree in information architecture and interactive experience design. Good for you. The AI is going to throw that out because you didn't say technical communication, and that's explicitly what they're looking for. So I say this as a guy with a PhD in English who is very pretentious. This is the wrong area to flex. You want to flex when you're in the room for the interview, but you're not even going to get the interview if the AI doesn't let you pass the door. Isn't it funny? All those movies and stories about us fighting the AI. This now is how we fight the AI. It's not exactly the Terminator, is it? I swear I didn't put this in the book, but of course I have a thing on there. Make sure your spelling and grammar are correct in Zoom. Okay. Am I still signed in? Well, sorry guys, that's kind of weird. My thing still says I'm recording, but all of a sudden I got a little pop-up saying signed out because you're signed into another device. I don't know. Technology is weird and I'm old. The other thing that they put in here, and again, I keep saying this, but this is in the AI screening section, but this is also supremely important by the time a human being is looking at your resume, is to quantify results whenever possible. All right, so here's a basic example. You have a basic resume or basic job application. It's like, hey, what were your responsibilities at this job? And you can take that very literally, right? Where it's like, well, I did X, Y, and Z, and that's all I have to say about that. But it's better if you can hey, how were you an asset to that organization at that time? It's like, and you could be like, under my management, my team was able to save significantly versus previous years. It's like, okay, that's better. But of course, some of y'all are probably asking the same question now. As soon as you say, I helped them save significantly, the other people are gonna be like, how significantly is significantly? So if you actually have some game tape on, oh, hey, under my management, our sales our sales rose 22%. Under my management, we were able to trim the budget by 31%. Stuff like that. That is catnip to the people. It gets you past the AI door, but it's also just catnip for the people that are hiring. It's like, they don't want somebody that just, I did a bunch of stuff. And they don't even just want somebody that's like, hey, I saved them money. They want somebody that's got the receipts on everything they were able to, offer to previous organizations, because it makes the hiring manager say, hey, they've got something to offer to our organization. Let's hire them. Okay. Now they have this, I meant to pull this up before the video, but they have a thing on here to review your social media profile. So if you guys can bear with me just a minute, there is a very, if you'll pardon my French, I'm already asking for your forgiveness, but there was a thing in recent years where this woman applied to NASA, got in for an internship. She got the internship, and then she was vulgar about it on social media. Well, I'll just read the thing to you. And so she's tweeting out, it's always Twitter, isn't it? Everyone shut the fuck up. I got accepted for a NASA internship. And a man named Homer Hickam responds in a very Captain America way. Language. And she responds to Homer Hickam, suck my dick and balls, I'm working at NASA. That's a direct quote. I'm looking at it right now. Homer Hickam responds with, and I am on the National Space Council that oversees NASA. All right, so I believe that she ended up, not getting that. I think someone told me later on that he helped get her back in. But I just thought, that I'm sure none of you would do something quite that crazy or whatever. But that's just a very extreme example of we live in a connected digital world. As soon as you apply, nothing keeps somebody from pulling up, I guess if you're an old like me, your Facebook, but also it could be your Twitter if they can find it, your Instagram, your anything that has your name attached to it. Now, if you're tech savvy enough, you can, shut a lot of stuff down so they can't find much from just casually perusing. But I have heard some horror stories about places that wouldn't hire a candidate until it's like, all right, now log into your social media accounts on our company computer so we can peruse them. I personally think that's an extreme violation of privacy, but it is something you should be aware of as a possibility. And I say this as somebody with the loudest, screechiest, and most annoying social media accounts. But 10 years is a hell of a drug. Don't be like me. You can clean up your social media before you apply. All right. And sorry, that's a live text from my son asking if I want any Chick-fil-A. Nah, but thank you. Ate a huge burger at a food truck earlier. I'm sure you were curious about my dietary habits. How does he keep this form? We wonder. All right. So they have a thing here going over to 337. So the letter of application. Now, this is sometimes easier said than done, but a bit of conventional wisdom here is address your cover letter to who is actually doing the hiring, right? Because so many people do the to whom it may concern. Nothing is wrong with addressing it to whom it may concern. It does concern somebody, but if you can actually, if so-and-so is the hiring director and you put their name in there, then a few things happen. One, it's human nature. It's a little bit of flattery. It goes a long way. It might help you win them over. But also, on a very basic level, it shows that you were willing to do the homework. Like everybody that applied obviously wants the job, and everyone wants the job because they want money. But only a handful of candidates are going to go that extra mile and find out XYZ things about the company before they send in the application. And I mean, I don't think I have to explain, if you look like a person that's putting in more work, I mean, that's why they call it the extra mile, because not everybody's doing it. So if you're one of the ones that does it, benefits for you. All right. Again, they have use a standard font, I guess if you want to give an executive a heart attack, you could submit it in Comic Sans or something. But in all seriousness, it's like, yes, again, Times New Roman or Arial or Calibri isn't name checked by the book. That's another standard one. Things like that. It sounds obvious as the words leave my mouth, but applications, it's visual. I tell my students this all the time. Essays are a visual language. There are certain things that you do, not because it's a grammar rule, not because it's like an MLA rule for a composition class, but because hey, that annoys your readers. I've had people before, I'll turn the page and it's just one giant unbroken paragraph. I'm like, please break that up. Dr. Snellgrove, what is the grammatical rule? It's like there's not a grammatical rule. Well, what is the MLA rule? It's like there's not an MLA rule. Well, why should I put a paragraph break there? Because readers don't want to read that much unbroken text. It's human nature. You want to make stuff easier to read, not harder to read. And when it comes to a cover letter, for instance, and or the resume, you want a standard font, something that is easy to read and understand, and that doesn't turn them off. All right. I already mentioned this earlier, but they mentioned on 337, you want to sound confident. You also, of course, want to sound interested. You want to sound eager. But this is the hat trick. You also don't want to sound desperate, and you also don't want to sound arrogant. So you really are trying to find a kind of sweet spot there where it's like, all right, I know my value, but I'm also, a team player. I'm not too full of myself. I don't have the acrid stink of somebody that desperately needs a job. I've had that stink. I can talk about it. All right. And this is another area where, I shouldn't act like I'm surprised, but where your book had some very tangible information here towards the bottom of 337 about using action verbs. And so, how earlier we were talking about you want to be able to quantify what you did. How did you add value to your organization? And so it's like, hey, instead of just I did this, I did this, I did this. It's like, all right, this is not a complete list, but they have things down here like promote, maintain, implement, prepare, improve, manage, operate, oversee, all this stuff. And it's just one of those things where you don't want to do that thing where you made your simple job sound like the most complex, thing in the entire world. But at the same time, it's like, hey, why do you just want to say, I did sales, I oversaw the sales team, or I led the sales record 3 years in a row, or something like that. It makes it sound more dynamic, makes it sound more interesting. And you'll notice the pattern here helps you stand out from the people that didn't choose the action verbs. It's just one more way of helping you stand out and get the job and get paid. This is another, it was real like murderer's row of useful info here. Bottom of 337 going to the top of 338. They talk about the idea of like you have to say I, right? I know in your formal essays, we always, well, I don't, but many people tell you to avoid the word I in your formal essays. But as it points out, you got to say I. I did this. I improved this. I administered this. I managed this. Yada yada. But they point out that you should, in a perfect world, be saying you and your, talking about the organization more than you're saying I and me. And why is that? Well, same thing we've been saying. Like, hey, the whole idea here is to present yourself as a potential asset to an organization that will hire you. This is, I hate to say it, because we can't reduce humanity to numbers, man. But yeah, this is the world. This is an exchange. You are saying you're willing to sell your services, and they've got money. That's your salary. So what they're over here saying, what's my return on investment? If I give him my money, what am I getting in return? Right. So this is just an area where it's like, all right, here I plan to help your organization grow in the following areas. I hope to help you expand into key quadrants. I hope to facilitate one day a horizontal merger that will help us, achieve corporate synergy. Oh, that kind of stuff. It's like, hey, what will I do for you? All right. So they have a thing at the top of 338. I wish this wasn't the way of the world, but it is. Avoid mention of salary and benefits. And your book doesn't, really, it's just like 2 or 3 sentences on this. They don't get into it in great detail. But what I was going to say to you here is there's 2 reasons you don't avoid salary and benefits. And one of them you probably not suspected. All right, one, the kind of obvious one is you don't necessarily want to turn them off right away. Think of this, we're mixing all the metaphors today, but it's kind of like a courtship. Once you're in the room, once you're in maybe a second round interviews or something, we start talking turkey about money. But if you come out like, I expect to get this high salary, they might be like, no, pass. But this is the thing that nobody ever sees coming. We are unfortunately like trained by the corporate world to kind of undervalue ourselves. And there's a lot of interesting, stories online where somebody had like a certain salary in mind when they went into an interview, but they deliberately didn't mention it. And when money came up, they would just politely say, I'm very flexible. Did you have a salary range in mind? And they're like, oh my God, the range is much higher. It starts much higher than I thought it would be. So imagine if you're the person going in like, I will work for 60,000. And the hiring manager's like, damn, it starts at 75. He'll really work for, okay. So just keep that in mind. It's not just that you can scare him away like he wants too much money. You can also undervalue yourself and really kind of screw up your earnings potential there. All right. So the beginning of the application. Start by explaining you're applying for a job. Identify the specific job for which you're applying. And this is like part of the formal language. I know it looks and sounds stupid, but literally every time I send off a freelance writing application, it's like, hi, my name is Dr. Chris Nelgrove, and I'm writing to express my interest in the position of freelance entertainment reporter. Let them know right away what's going on. Nothing, as the book says, don't try anything flashy, fancy, tricky, or anything like that. All right. It says, if appropriate, start your letter by dropping the name of a reference. This is always handy. I think at this point in the semester, I don't really have to remind you guys, but it's all about networking, not always what you know, but who you know, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's like, yeah, if somebody, in the organization referred you, mention that. That's, don't be bashful about it. That's something they need to know, and they need to know quickly, because right now they're trying to figure out if they're going to keep reading the rest of your job application. So you want that info sooner rather than later. All right. And they point out here, and this is always easier said than done, but you want to interest them. It's like you want to be specific about the job you desire. And it points out that you can't just say like, I'm willing and able to work any job you have. It's like, but basically people say that kind of thing and they think that it makes them look like a team player. I'll do whatever you need me to do. But think about what that actually says. It makes you sound like a minion for the Joker or something. Whatever you say, boss. Right away, boss. What do you need me to do, boss? Don't you wish that was the actual definition of gooning? I do. Oh boy, I do. All right. But it's saying that, like, in this section, you can talk about, show your demonstration of knowing the company, being specific about what you want to do, being specific about what you have to offer, maybe noting like, I'm very interested in your organization because it has made such strides in the fields of blah, blah, blah. Again, shows you did your homework. You're not just someone desperate for the job. All right, in the body of your application here, your cover letter, I should say, sorry. Highlight items from your education and experience. Show your qualifications for the job you seek. Basically, like, you are telling them, I went to school for XYZ and I learned ABC and I have 1, 2, 3 certifications, but they don't immediately know how that translates to the job they need you to do and the job you want to do. So this is, well, where you explain that. That also works for when you are talking about your job experience later on. It's like, hey, XYZ makes me an ideal candidate for this position because you show them that, I used to tell people like the patchwork of your jobs, you got to show them that's actually a quilt, baby. There's a pattern to this. It makes you ideal for what they need. Let's see. So you can, if you have, like, it talks about focusing on your academic record. As you get more job experience, you're obviously going to emphasize your school experience less. But for people that don't have a lot of job experience, this is one of the easiest ways to, let's not say pad out a resume, but to make yourself sound more attractive to an employer. We talked about this earlier, but be specific about your accomplishments. Instead of saying like, I am a natural leader or something, it's like, I was a project manager from 2019 to 2022. I facilitated a merger. I helped, create corporate synergies, reduce cost, just any, what did you do? Not just, I am a leader. This is the classic show, don't tell. Instead of telling the leaders, show them the leadership skills that you have by telling them what you did specifically. This is also, we talked about it earlier, but this is also where you would quantify very specific accomplishments if you've not done so already. Oh, I boosted sales by 23%, stuff like that. You need to be able to back that up. You can't just make up numbers like our current AI is doing, somewhat alarmingly. But you need to, if you've got the data, if you've got the receipts, then yeah, put it in there. If you don't have, if you're sitting there like, how would I get these receipts? You got to start keeping track now at your current job, because that'll help you get a better future job. All right. They mentioned again, don't talk about salary. Let's see, if you are already working, emphasize working. We just talked about that. In the last paragraph of the body, refer the employer to your enclosed resume. Mention your willingness to supply additional information such as references, letters of recommendation, or college transcripts. And I got to tell you guys that I'm sure you were just sitting around here morbidly curious about this, but that is the reason that we don't have a references requirement for the resume assignment. It's like, just tell them you can provide them if they want them. All right. So that about wraps things up. Like I said, we're going to have a separate follow-up video here directly about the resume itself, really help you with the resume assignment. As always, if you have any questions about any of it, feel free to email me. Feel free to text me at 863-835-2399. Y'all have a good one. Bye.